Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Europe Center. And I would also like to extend a welcome to people from the Stanford libraries who have published for this event also and who have brought Marek here to Stanford. My name is Christophe Crombez. I will be chairing this session here today. I'm a senior research fellow at the Europe Center. And I'm very happy to introduce our speaker for today, Marek Tamm. He's a professor of cultural history at Tallinn University in Estonia. He's also the head of the Tallinn University Center of Excellence in Intercultural Studies and a member of the Estonian Academy of Sciences. His primary research fields are cultural history of medieval Europe, historical theory, digital history, and cultural memory studies. His most recent book is The Fabric of Historical Time, co-written with Zoltan Bolditsar Simon. I don't know whether I pronounced this correctly. Published by Cambridge University Press earlier this year. The title of the talk today is Making Sense of the Past, How Digital Technology Changes Our Relations with Time, History, and Memory. Marek will talk for about 35 minutes, I believe, and then we will have questions that all of you can ask, questions from the audience here and questions from our audience online. If you are following the talk online, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and I will raise them during our Q&A time. One more comment, we have microphones on the table. So that means that private conversations that you may have will also be picked up by these microphones. So that may be a good reason.
And to Russia.
That may be a good reason to refrain from having private conversations during the talk or during the Q&A session. On the other hand, it will make it very easy to capture your voices when you do ask questions during the Q&A time. All right, so much for my introduction. I will now pass the floor on to Marek, who will give his presentation. Thank you very much, Marek.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. Thank you for coming. It's my first ever talk in Stanford, so it's a great honor. I'm very grateful to the Europe Center for hosting this, and of course, grateful to Liisi, who's the curator for Estonian and Baltic Studies at Stanford University Libraries. And what I'm going to do today is to present you one part of an ongoing research that I'm carrying out together with a colleague already mentioned, Zoltan Bolditsar Simon from the Bielefeld University in Germany. And the project is very ambitious. It's preliminary titled The New Historical Condition. And we hope to provide in this book an account on the transformation of what we mean by history in the age of unparalleled technological capacities and the simultaneous natural social crisis of the Anthropocene. The central argument of the book is that something we call in this book the new historical condition. And we try to cover various aspects of this new historical condition in the book, including the redefinition of the human as both as a biological and as a social being. Also, our changing relations to the future, but also to what extent something that can be called the new digital condition is changing our essential reading. So, yes, I don't have to emphasize what extent digital technology is shaping our everyday lives, or to what extent our dependencies on digital media and computation systems have become inextricably entangled with us, and to what extent we rely on digital infrastructures for sensing, communicating, and coordinating. And indeed, many scholars have used this label of the digital condition. I would like to point out especially the book by German scholar Felix Stalder, titled precisely The Digital Condition. I will not dwell long on this digital condition, but still would like to capture this very idea by 5 key terms. First, of course, digitization, that everything is being encoded to digital form. Secondly, datafication, that increasing number of our aspects of life are being transformed into data and therefore being quantified. Thirdly, algorithmization, that increasing use of the automated instructions to transform input data into a desired output data. Then platformization, that many of our social, economic, and other traffics is being channeled by a global online platform ecosystem, again, driven by algorithms and fueled by digital data. And last but not least, virtualization, that we are turning increasing number of things and phenomena that exist or existed or could exist in a real form into a virtual version. Now, I would argue that among its various implications, this digital condition is also forcefully reshaping our sense of time, memory, and history, giving rise to something I would propose to call digital historicity, meaning a digitally mediated relationship with the past. And indeed, I believe that this digital historicity forces us to rethink how we conceive the change over time, the ways we relate to past times, and more specifically, what we consider to be the past and its relations with the present. So I have kind of 2 main questions that will guide my talk today. First, what happens to our sense of historicity when it is processed by the digital? And secondly, what are the main new digital tools and environments and platforms for relating to the past, and how these tools mold our historical thinking? The plan for the talk is following. What am I going to do? I try to provide you with a kind of conceptual mapping of this new digital historicity, and I will focus on 5 elements of this new situation: memory, archive, reenactment, history, and historical games, and with an emphasis on historical games. But let me start by a few general characterizations of this digital historicity. So what is happening with our sense of historicity? I would argue first that our relations with the past are increasingly becoming fleeting, fluid, interactive, immersive, dynamic, and you name it. We will come back to this with various examples, but I think this is the fundamental feature of this new digital historicity. Secondly, the past is not anymore merely made present, represented, but also made virtual. So we are shifting from the questions of historical representation, of making his past present again, to the issues of sensory immersion into the past. And I refer here to Italian-American historian Claudio Foco has called that we are facing history as the experience of the virtually past. And thirdly, history is becoming a participatory enterprise, because participating is one of the features of digital condition. And this means that we have increasing number of different digital environments, platforms, infrastructures that allow us to, so to say, experience the past on our own terms in ways that are personally meaningful and individually relevant. But now, more specifically about some of these new elements in this digital historicity, now we have to refine some fundamental concept of our sense of historicity. The first is, of course, memory, because there cannot be any history without memory. And I would argue, following many memory scholars like Andrew Hoskins and others, that digital media technologies are transforming how we remember, what we remember, why we remember, how we construct narratives of the past by using different digital storytelling tools, etc. So digital memory, as it were, is a kind of it's mobile, it's dynamic and procedural. And but also it is subjected to new forms of control. And here we return this idea of algorithms, because we can see to what extent the information that is delivered to us is being determined by the use of algorithms, or let's say algorithmic systems that order and filter the content related to what we remember, are becoming kind of tools of mnemotechnologies, and some scholars call it the rise of algorithmic memory. Again, I cannot dwell long on this, but probably it's directly related to the way we are redefining the very idea of archive and archiving. Because usually archive has been something rather, as a kind of passive storage, that we keep everything that we find interesting and important. But with the digital information, the archiving is becoming processual and generated in many respects. And the new logic of the archive is therefore, again, fluidity, ubiquity. It's always in becoming, constantly changing, constantly in motion. And in this regard, the work of German media archaeologist Wolfgang Ernst is, I think, particularly interesting and relevant, especially his book Digital Memory and the Archive. And he argues for this kind of fundamental shift from the static residential archive to the dynamic temporal storage. And as he puts it, the archive transforms from storage space to storage time. And I will come back to this in a minute. The whole other field that I find very important and will bring us closer to the digital history games is the importance of digital historical reenactment and digital or kind of historical virtual reality environments, because these new digital environments create completely new possibilities for experiencing the past through simulations. And some of these simulations or reconstructions of historical events or spaces or cultural practices are very, I would say, convincing and also feel very reliable. They are, evidence-based and produced by professionals. And they seem to provide, therefore, a kind of third-person access to the past. And just to give you one example, I think you know many of examples from your own experience, but for instance, in Amsterdam, they launched within the Anne Frank House virtual reality project that provides visitors a kind of carefully reconstructed animated VR tour of the secret annex that housed the Frank family. And they advertise its kind of immersive experience that you can be yourself part of this historical situation. And they have also prepared a short video trailer. I'm going to show you that kind of first-person perspective, how you can wander in the rooms of Anne Frank, in the room of Anne Frank. And pay attention to this, how they frame it, what kind of text they provide to comment the video, talking about experiences and immersion, etc. So basically, you can walk around with these VR glasses on and feel as you were the very inhabitant of this building. Now, another field that, of course, is very important for myself and for many of us who are historians, because it is clear that digital technology is also creating new forms of historical research, new forms of history writing, and also new methods of historical research. This will be a completely another talk, but just few examples. We are witnessing to these new forms of multimodal or hypertextual or online history writing, because traditionally, as we know, history has been this kind of prose realist narrative, while with the digital technology, whole new forms of history have become possible. But also, of course, we have plenty of new methods, often borrowed from other disciplines, including spatial history, network history, etc. In recent years, and especially recent months, there has been a lot of discussion about the non-human writing history enabled by computer programs, by large language models, machine learning, big data, etc. And there are a few, experiments with writing non-human history. But one point I wanted to emphasize is the fundamental paradigm shift in history from a culture of scarcity to a culture of abundance. Because as historians, we are used to work with scarcity. There's always something missing. We don't have everything we want about the topics we are studying. But now, on the one hand, the digitization, but on the other hand, the information we are providing for future historians, we're creating a completely new situation. We are overwhelmed by information. And this is a topic that was recently addressed by a Canadian historian, Ian Milligan, in his book, History in the Age of Abundance. And indeed, he says that we used to, as a rule, forget. Now, we have the power of recall and retrieval at a scale that will decisively change how our society remembers. And this is, again, I think, very important topic that needs attention from historians and from other scholars. But now I'm approaching to the main, let's say, focus of this talk, namely the digital historical case. And I think these are important. For those reasons, on the one hand, because historians, professional historians, tend to ignore them, saying that's not serious, that's, these are nothing to think about it. But actually, on the other hand, you have millions, tens of millions of people who are basically everyday basis playing these games and engaging with the past through immersion in these virtual ludic worlds. And as you know, digital historical games are competing film industry, and they're becoming massively popular. So to understand how these digital games works to offer engagement with the past is something that needs to be very carefully studied in the future, especially as we have this new generation of digital natives coming to universities, doing historical research, and I believe they have different relationship with the past while having a massive experience of playing these historical video games. Again, I will try to capture the essential importance and characteristics of the digital historical games by three key terms. First, of course, gamification. It is clear that all historical information presented by digital games is submitted the rules of gamification to the game design elements and principles. So everything that we see or everything we can do in video games are constrained by game playability concerns. And of course, this gamification brings along many important aspects. I again point out just one, namely gamification often brings along militarization, because very many of these historical video games are battle games, or they include the role of warfare and soldiers. And again, this shape, I think, the relation with many people with the past and makes past looking more, military than it actually was. Second characteristic is immersivity. And this is, of course, again, critical, because this creates this illusion or this experience. It's difficult to find the right words even, because on the one hand, it's illusion, but on the other hand, it works. And then it isn't illusion anymore in a way. So indeed, these video games provide this immersivity experience and also produce, again, an illusion to reenact challenges that faced historical agents, because you're provided with the same information. You feel that you are, stepping in the boots of historical agents and can make decisions about what order to take or what action to take. For instance, almost a random example, if you read how these video games are being advertised, for instance, The Brothers in Arms, Hell Highway by Ubisoft from 2008, they sell this game to the players as, step into the boots of a soldier, hit the dirt and get prone, rip grenades from your chest and hurl them at your enemies, see and feel the blast of nearby explosions, and so forth. So the idea is that you should be immersed in the middle of history taking place at this very moment. And the last, but not least, element is the interactivity, which comes along with immersivity in a way. And so most of the games encourage the players to contribute to the scenario or the script of the game. So the games provide different types of agency for the players. In this regard, empower the players that you can decide in strategy games, for instance, the future of this or that civilization, or in action games, what actions to be taken, or also how to interact with other players in the case of multiplayer games. So in a way, these historical video games are co-authored by the player. This has been also emphasized by many scholars, most notably by Adam Chapman, one of the pioneers of digital games, historical digital game studies, claiming that the historical narrative produced in these historical video games is always produced by the actions of both the developer historian and the player. This makes it, participatory experience. I wanted to give yet another example to illustrate my point. And the example, of course, is well known and famous, the Assassin's Creed series produced by Ubisoft, and probably the most popular historical video game on the market. And it has sold some 200 million copies so far, which no history books can ever compete with. And there's a lot of other transmedia projects, spin-offs, and so on and so forth. And so far, there have been 13 games in this series, and each game takes place in different historical period or era. So you can, at the end of the day, have a kind of gamified experience of almost most of the historical periods. The last game came out just a couple of weeks ago, taking place in Baghdad at Islamic Golden Age. And also you can have Italian Renaissance or French Revolution and so on and so forth. I will not explain what the game is about. It's not maybe even that interesting. It's about the two secret societies having a centuries-long battle, the Assassins and the Templars. But what is important from my perspective is how meticulously the historical setting is reconstructed in these games. They engage a great number of historians and other specialists to make these historical environments as faithful, as accurate as possible. And people who play these games spend a remarkable amount of time within these historical environments. You need at least 30 to 60 hours to finish a game, but normally you play much longer. So I've met my students who have spent hundreds of hours in revolutionary Paris, and they know every single corner of this period. And no history teacher can ever compete with this knowledge. To give you a snapshot idea who haven't seen it before. So this is a random clip from the Assassin's Creed Unity, which takes place during the French Revolution in Paris. So it's a scene from the player's perspective.
And their weapons. Nobody try anything. Come on, boys! Find me a warden! No. No. Put me back. Put me back. Run. Run. They're killing us. Run. Animals. You know what it's like. His skull cracks like an egg.
Well, so as you can see, it's a quite violent setting, but on the other hand, most immersive and almost you can believe that you are in the middle of 18th century, late 18th century Paris. But let me conclude with some general remarks. Of course, the first, as I said in the beginning, I believe that this new digital condition brings along a new sense of historicity that I would propose to call digital historicity, which means different way of being in time and different way of articulating the categories of past, present, and the future. But to make a very long story short, I'd say that there's two foundational features that seem to characterize this digital historicity, and these are can sound a bit paradoxical, but they play out in different fields or dimensions. First, what they call specialization of time. So we seem to increasingly, and I mean, let's say the younger digital native generation, identify pastness more with place than time. Historical time becomes immersive and spatial real time. And of course, it is particularly visible in the video games. Then you move along a space. The time doesn't change really, but you are in a historical setting, and history becomes space for your environment. But the same happens with virtual reality experiences and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, we can see something I would call temporalization of space. And this we can see especially what comes to the memory and archiving and other forms of past relations, as pointed out also by Wolfgang Ernst, that our relations with the past are becoming fleeting, interactive, and dynamic. And the memorial space, such as archive, is being replaced by a series of temporal entities and temporal processes. So that was my short introduction to the new digital historicity, and I hope it raised some questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marek. Thanks for this great presentation. We now have some time for questions from the audience here, also online. So online, if you can please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Maybe I'll start out with a question myself. I'm not a historian at all. I don't really know anything about this subject. But when I sort of think about digitalization and the current age that we're living in and its relations to history, maybe the first thing I think about is, and it is somewhat related to your talk, I would say, at least from my perspective. I mean, there's a lot of talk about fake news. What about fake history? And you talk about these games. There is also a whole set of TV shows that about the Medici or something. And I always wonder to what extent these are actually accurate. And I notice, especially when I talk to some of my younger family members, that sometimes they take what happens in these series as being the real history, basically. So to what extent is that something that you work on and that you think about or worry about? Then of course we could make another step and think about the people who are going to be writing the history of our time. Of course, there's always some possibility for manipulation and stuff like that, but I guess with the media, with the current digitalization and so on, maybe there's going to be more competing versions of history or something. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Of course, this is a very crucial topic. What comes to this new digital condition, and let's say on the one hand, I can see indeed there are serious ethical issues, and this of course is not related only to this digital historicity, but digital life in all its facets and manifestations. And we should be prepared for this. And I think this is one of the extra reasons why we should study this new digital condition to better understand how it operates and what are the risks and how we should be prepared, how we should have a new digital literacy to orient in this new, very complex situation. But then on the other hand, let's say from the epistemological perspective, when you say that on the one hand we have fake history and real history, then it becomes, of course, more complicated because what is real history, and how, where to draw the line that this is accurate, that this is inaccurate, who says, and on what basis, and then of course it brings along this whole infinite discussion about historical truth, historical objectivity, etc. So I would not, go into this direction. I'd say that that's maybe not the main point. Is it real, or is it not real? I'm more interested in what it does with us. What's the impact? What's the effects? And how to elaborate new critical tools to cope with this? Because I mean, historical research has developed since early 19th century. The whole toolbox of critical tools, how to analyze historic information, how to check that this information is accurate or not. But we seem not to have enough tools for this new digital condition, for the similar checking and controlling, and that's why we should deal with this. And for instance, Assassin's Creed made recently, some years ago, interesting innovation, let's say, that next to these quite violent games, they also started to elaborate some pedagogical tools, what they call the tours, so that you can visit these historic environments. You can visit the Library of Alexandria, for instance, and without any gaming, without any killing somebody, just to learn. And that they say that they should be used at history classrooms. That these can serve for providing new ways to learn from the past. So it's not a black and white discussion. There are risks involved, but also great opportunities to make past valorized or engaged with by using these new technological tools.
All right, thank you. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It's an intriguing topic. And speaking from the perspective of a ex-teacher, a teacher of history, and also kind of a little gamer myself, having played Assassin's Creed, I very much can feel the pressure that games like this put on the gamers or the players' perception of history. And asking from the position of a teacher, in relation to your latest remarks, are we as educators of history or researchers of history putting too much on the hands of corporations who are developing these video games, or the producers who are in charge of developing these video games, by taking them into our classroom, letting them in, saying that you can, my students, you can learn through this game? Are we letting go of responsibility as a reaction to the digitalization of history a little bit?
Well, that's definitely not, that's not the, let's say, the accurate or the adequate response to this new challenge, because we should never give away our responsibility, but we should still, on the other hand, include these new opportunities, these new tools into our teaching toolbox. But we should, at the same time, teach these young children how to keep a distance, how to have a critical approach to these new things. That, as I mean, for instance, I guess normally we teach students to critically read historical sources. We provide, this is this text, this another, please compare. The same can be done with the video games. That your different representations, data representation of the same era, of the same period, of the World War II or the Crusade, and play with all different games, and then tell me, what to say, what do you experience. So to raise the self-awareness and criticism of these kinds of tools. So nothing should be taken for granted, but we shouldn't ignore these and look like they don't exist, because anyway, all these people are actually at home playing, and you should build your teaching on this experience and make use of it. And this is, I think, it's very, very, very important also at university level, how to include these new digital affordances into our teaching without, of course, giving up our responsibility.
So some other hands raised here earlier. Yeah, you?
Thank you, Professor Tamm, for your excellent presentation. The question kind of related to the two. That's something that you shared very interesting. Is that my question will be the positionality of history researcher, and on the other hand, that for example, I've got invitations from game companies to work on such programs, but I have an insight of the ethical struggle in terms of what I can do and what I can't. And I feel like also as a female researcher, there's a lot of stereotypes about women, very much sexualized, I would say, in these games, and also racial prejudices in terms of the black people and how yellowish like people are treated and so on. So I'm just like wondering, like, it's kind of, I don't know if you have been invited to such offers, and if you were, what sort of strategies would you have in terms of battling against the corporate entities? On the other hand, you try to be more kind of taking the actions. If you're not taking a spot, that there are others who are trying to make money and take advantage of that. So that's kind of an ethical challenge, I guess.
That's a great question. And of course, I come from a country without any big game industry, so I've never been invited to join any of these companies, I'm sorry to say. But of course, I mean, on the one hand, I encourage historians to cooperate with these different companies, but on equal terms. I mean, you should not be submitted only to these commercial rules, that you should keep your certain autonomy. Like in film industry, you have historical consultants working over this or that film. So I wouldn't say that we should avoid at any cost all contacts with the game industry. But of course, we should again be confident and protect our values and our approach, our critical perspective. But actually, it's related to the much wider question, namely, what could be in the future the forms of transmitting historical evidence-based information? Whether the fact that we keep writing books, whether it is sufficient, whether actually we will be heard in the future. And I mentioned briefly that there are some new experiments on different multimodal history writing, and there's some first fantastic interactive e-books being published by MIT Press and others that try to overcome the linearity of this text that we have taken for granted for a few centuries now. And whether historians should start thinking about why not to say something which is very carefully researched and evidence-based, but in different forms, in new digital forms. And I would say that we shouldn't say that digital game or virtual environment, reality environment is per se unsuitable for transmitting evidence-based historical research. I mean, the channel, the medium doesn't have to shape the message in this regard. So, but of course, it's very tricky. And I just raise the question. Maybe you should start thinking how to innovate the very history writing and how to make it more appealing for future generations.
All right. More questions? Yes, here.
Thank you for this interesting topic and enlarging my hope of understanding more. I think some of the questions today reflect, in this country, the topic of misinformation, fake news, which also exists in other countries, history rewritten. The fact that in this country, many textbooks for primary through high school are written by conservatives in a certain state and leaving out crucial elements of history might make us very suspicious of these tools. On the other hand, I hear you that it looks like it could have great potential for history, understanding history and learning it, if it's ethically done. Just as some teachers are accepting that AI is here and they are going to experiment with using it in the classroom for its potential positive attributes. So I'm wondering if you and others who are developing this field could look at these issues of apprehension and distrust of things that we have seen misused, and also engage ethicists who could start drawing up codes of ethics for use of this technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because yes, indeed, these are very important topics and ever present, because history has been used for propagandistic reasons throughout human history. And I myself was born and raised during Soviet Estonia. I know what the Soviet textbook looks like. So there's nothing new. But you are right that these new digital technological tools, put it on a different scale and make it much more massive and more impactful than ever before. But the problem remains the same. I mean, what are the ethical, as code of conduct or limits? What can be said about the past? And yes, so my answer is the same. That in this new digital condition, we need new rules of knowledge production. The old ones are still valuable, but are not sufficient anymore. And we should have to, critically cope with this new situation when people have different relations with the past than we are used to. What does it mean, and what kind of concepts we need to make sense of this? And then once we have described the new situation, what kind of agreements we should decide upon to keep this society still functioning. Sure. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, here.
Actually, I hate to bring this up, but I just say it and then you should erase it afterwards. But you know that what the Nazis did in World War II, try to rewrite history their way. And all kind of similar processes we're talking about now already happened then. You don't need AI to reinvent bad ways of dealing with information.
Of course,
Anyway,
I said it's Nazi memoria during the Roman Empire, etc. But I mean, just to comment, elaborate on this. Personally, I'm nothing against rewriting history, because this is what I'm paid for. I mean, what do
job security?
What do historians do? They rewrite history in the sense they provide new interpretation, new analysis, and so this history is never written in stone. But this is different. But I mean, you can rewrite history by following certain, let's say, epistemological rules of producing historical knowledge. That you have to be evidence-based, you have to follow certain methods, etc. But otherwise, that's what we do. We rewrite history.
All right. More questions? All the way in the back, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was super interesting. I assume that every revolution that humankind has experienced has somehow changed the way how people think about past and time and history. So I was wondering whether are there any significant differences between the digital revolution and the other revolutions that we have experienced?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would even make it more narrow, meaning that every technological revolution brings along a new relationship with time, memory, and present. I mean, think about invention of the writing. I mean, the history is never the same once we started writing down our experiences. And the sense of the past in oral cultures is completely different in comparison to the written society. Think about the invention of printing. we cannot imagine the life before printing anymore. And we know what happens, reformations, revolutions. So in this regard, of course, the digital condition is just yet another technological revolution that by definition will redefine a lot of our previous notions of including time and space and memory and so on and so forth. So yes, that's let's say the starting point, that every important change in technology brings along important change in our way of thinking, including thinking about time and space and memory and so on and so forth.
Okay. Yes, Lucy?
Yeah, I have a question about the practical side of this. So I was wondering if you could give us maybe a couple of examples of how you personally have used, games in classes, or maybe your colleagues have done so. And also on a broader level, has there been a discussion in Estonia that you are aware of, in the Ministry of Education, for example, about incorporating these topics into the educational curriculum in general?
Yeah, that's very, very reasonable question. And my experience is somehow limited, but I'm giving a regular course, Introduction to Philosophy of History. And this is, for me, also an occasion to bring in digital video games and discuss about all the same questions about, accuracy and authenticity and fakeness and misinterpretation, etc. And we can critically discuss digital game as a source of history. And what kind of critical rules can we apply to video games as we apply them on newspapers or medieval chronicles or films. And I see that all the students are most excited because the majority of them have the experience of playing historical video games, so they can relate it much easier than, let's say, some other abstract topics. And it's also, I feel that they're very grateful because suddenly they realize that even at university you're allowed to talk about video games. That is not something you can hide. This is some dirty thing you're doing back home. Don't bring it to your classroom. So they're very grateful, and I actually have supervised quite a few graduate works, MA, BA theses about digital games as history, because suddenly they realize that's something I can study because I've played for years and years. I can turn it into a research subject. So that's also very kind of rewarding experience. And also have had a couple of presentation for Estonian History Teachers Association, where I also mentioned this topic, that actually they should start thinking about it. And I have to say that this is very tricky because maybe it's particular to Estonia, but the average age of history teachers is 50 plus. So they don't have almost any personal experience. They don't have a clue what does it mean. And that's an issue. That's a problem, I'd say. When you are facing a classroom full of young people who play these games very often, and you don't even know that this exists. And then some history teacher says to me that, yes, I had a guy in my class who started to ask very specific questions about Renaissance Florence, for very simple reasons. He was playing Assassin's Creed and he knows every the detail about it. And I say that you should capitalize on this, raise this interest and provide some other sources of information, some books, for instance, or I don't know, on the very same topic. So there is a curiosity, and instead of ignoring it or even blaming it, you should actually make use of it. Yeah.
Any questions? Yes, here.
Maybe I can just make a comment rather than a question.
Go ahead.
Picking up on really everything that's been said so far. There's been no deterrence of misused history forever. I mean, it hasn't proven just this September introduced a new Russian history book into every secondary school in
Absolutely,
Russia.
yeah. I've read it, yeah.
Yeah. And it seems to me that therefore the historian's role has always been, to some extent, the role of the police officer, if you like, trying to keep things on the straight and narrow to some extent. And it seems to me that we really need to hold on to notions of accuracy and authenticity and truth. And the historian's role continues to be to search for them, rewriting history as new evidence is uncovered and so on, because we probably never find the truth. We need to be extremely careful. So I would say to the historian here, jump in. And you know, the
Job secure.
technical designers are producing new tools for you. Jump in and use them. And not for profit, but for this continued research for truth. So if the film brings, say yes, I'm there, pay me, but you know, I'm going to be looking for the truth.
That's the challenge. Yeah, the agency will be.
All right, final question.
So I think it's wonderful you're capitalizing on this great interest. I mean, when kids are knowing which street corners in Florence had certain things happen, that's wonderful, and jumping in is wonderful. But the game as a paradigm, like a football game, has a winner, a definite winner, and a definite loser. And I've never seen history, at least in any, I've worked in the archives for many decades. I've never seen clear winners and clear losers. I think the paradigm of the game may be skewing the way we look at the details, even though it's wonderful to get the kids to look at the details.
I do agree, but to a certain extent, in the sense that the game, digital video game, imposes certain rules to this information, historic information they're providing. As I explained, also gamifying this information. Of course, the different kinds of game, not all have winners and losers. There are some strategy games that don't include these kind of battles. But what I would like to emphasize that we have to be critically aware about these rules that shape the information, because every medium has its own rules. Also, a linear historical text, academic text, imposes certain rules to historic information. It makes it, it narrativizes, it makes it linear. And that's why some people try to have this kind of hypertextual versions of history writing, because things happen simultaneously, but you cannot capture it in a linear text. So every medium somehow distorts the historical truth, if as it were. And what historians have been doing for a few centuries now is to analyze these distortions, to analyze these kind of these logics behind translating the information into some kind of medium. So the same applies to historical video games, I'd say. We have to learn how to analyze what happens when something is translated into a video game. And instead of saying that this outcome is inaccurate and fake or false, because in this regard, every historical document is fake.
Okay, maybe we have time for one last question, if there's anybody who wants to raise. Yes.
I'm just wondering, not from a gaming and historical perspective, but for very many people, gaming is escape from reality. And there's a lot of kind of entertainment, as a role of entertainment in there as well. And the same is with books, that there's a fact-based books and fiction-based books as well. And I'm just wondering that maybe we go too much towards like policing and thinking about what is the role there. Although for very many people assume gaming is actually like pure fiction, that you want to go for pure fiction. Obviously, if you bring this to the history classes and teaching perspective, that could be something else. But just like kind of from the perspective of gamers, that maybe this entertainment role is the main thing that actually gets people there.
For sure, and as you noticed, I was focusing only on historical video games, so the games that deliberately are situated in historical setting. So this means that even if you are, just for fun, you still act within a historical setting, and I would claim you still your relationship with the past is somehow changed purely because of this very experience, even if you're not particularly interested in history at all. So in this regard, yeah, majority of the games are not historical games, but still it's quite surprising to what extent history is popular in this video game industry, and some of the most popular video games are actually history based. But then, as you said, it's absolutely right. I think as a history professor, probably I decided for this job because of willing to escape our world. So it's so in this regard, we all kind of escaping for something, and it can be video game, it can be also academic, book. So in this regard, there is probably not a big difference.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Marek, for a great talk and for a very lively Q&A session and discussion. Thought it was very interesting. Before we leave, I want to mention that Marek is giving another talk on Wednesday, I believe, at a different center. Maybe you can say something more about it.
Yes, it will be a talk also with lunch at noon at the Center for Medieval and Early Modern Studies at Stanford. And this is something completely different. It will be about the techniques of truth production in the Middle Ages. So about confession, inquisition, and stuff like this. So that's the other side of me, the medievalist, who will be speaking.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.